So last week was the 9th of Av. The 9th of Av is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. It was the day when the temple was destroyed twice, some roughly 500 years apart. Very, very tragic day for the Jewish people. A day really where not only those tragedies happened, but many others. And it's really the day dedicated to mourning and experiencing the pain and the loss and all the traumas we've gone through. From the 9th of Av, we actually come what was yesterday, Saturday, to the 15th of Av. The 15th of every month is sort of like a minor, I don't know if I can use the word holiday, but a nice day, a festive day, a special day. As the Jewish people were told, are compared to the moon, just as the moon waxes and wanes, so too the Jewish people. You know, the Jewish people get larger, and then somehow the world attacks us, and we shrink, but then we rise again, and then we shrink again. The waxing and waning of the Jewish people until we have the complete power and energy of redemption, when then like the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, a constant perpetual light. That will be the light of the Jewish people. But therefore, because of this relationship to the moon, we're sort of lunar. So every 15th of the month is like a good day. The moon is in its fullness. It's like the energy of the Jew is in its fullness. That's the 15th of every month, which is why Passover begins on the 15th. And Sukkot begins on the 15th. But the most special 15th was yesterday, the 15th of this month called Av. It's actually, we call it, Av is the name of the month, but we actually call it Menachem Av. Menachem means the comforter, because since we associate this month with the tragedies, we right away say Menachem Av. Menachem means Mashiach, God sending the comfort for all this pain. So our sages say that the best days for the Jewish people were the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Of course, we understand Yom Kippur, and we know about Yom Kippur, and we understand it's a very, very special day. But what in the world is the 15th of Av? 15th of Av is like, okay, it's the 15th of a month. The moon is in its fullness. Jewish people in its fullness. But that's true for the 15th of every month. And you might as well focus on Passover or Sukkot, which are holidays from the 15th. What's this 15th of this month of Av? We explain that we experienced the greatest down on the 9th of Av. Why does God send us a down? God, he only wants us to ascend. Everyone in this class, everyone here is dedicated to God. He only wants you to go up. He only wants it to be better, and then better than that, and then better than that. So why does life not always feel that way? Why sometimes does it feel like it's a down, or maybe a down and a down? Well, because the way the world works, really implanted even in the very psyche fabric of creation itself, is that what seems like a down, like a descent, is part of the process of ascension. In the Hebrew, we say the descent is for the purpose of the ascent. And whenever it seems like we're in a down space, the down is part of the upward process. So there's no down greater for the Jewish people than the 9th of Av, where the first temple was destroyed. And then much more catastrophically, spiritually and physically, was the destruction of the second temple. Like the first temple, we were 7 years of exile and we're back. And the 7 years of exile, besides Purim, was actually a pretty gentle exile. But after the destruction of the second temple, it's been a horrific exile. The world has been washed in the blood of the Jews, and we've been in exile for over 1900 years. So physically and spiritually, a far, far more intense down. And the intensity of the down is to create the intensity of the up, of the redemption that's coming from all this. Because every down is only part of the process of moving upward. So if the 9th of Av symbolizes the down in this month, the 15th is the up of that down, which means it's not just like, every month on the 15th, it's the fullness of the moon, the fullness of the Jewish people. No. If the 9th of Av is such a down, the 15th of Av has to be such a commensurate up, which is why it is the greatest day, according to the sages. The greatest day for the Jewish people were the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. And in both of those days, we're told that it was a matrimony day. It's a day that the girls would go out in the fields and would dance, and they would actually exchange clothing with each other. So they always made sure the girl that had less than them had one of their nicest dresses. And they would say to the men, come, take me, find your bride here, which of course has lots of understandings. And one of them is, this is the Jewish people, God's bride, talking to God. Like, we're the bride, he's the groom, and it's like been a long time. We're saying, God, take us. We're ready to get married to you. We're ready for redemption. Take your bride. Let's get married. We want this to happen already. So this was the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, obviously the day of ultimate spirituality for the Jewish people, and the 15th of Av representing this tremendous energy from the down of the 9th of Av. So therefore, last week we did not meet. It was towards the very end of a very, very intense fast. Not only would we cannot eat or drink for some 25 hours, but just it's a very heavy time, especially until midday. Very heavy, heavy energy. So it was not really, and because it's the 9th of Av, when we're supposed to minimize our joy, we can't study Torah. Only very specific topics, because Torah, of course, gives us tremendous joy. So for all those reasons, it wasn't feasible to have a class last week, and I'm glad to have one this week. And we are up to second time around, chapter 3 of Ethics of the Fathers. So we did the first 8 sections, we call Mishnayos, last time around. So let's look starting with Mishnah 9 of chapter 3. Before we get started, I know I said a number of things here, both before when we're talking about how important it is to have children, God's gift, and don't think of the money tags, don't think of the price tags, don't think of how much it's going to cost you and you can't afford it. And now, in talking about this whole concept of the 9th and the 15th, anyone have any questions, thoughts, or reflections on anything I just said in either of those discussions? So as I said, we are up to the 9th thought, the 9th Mishnah. Because the 9th Mishnah says, anyone whose fear of sin comes before his wisdom will continue, will endure. But anyone whose wisdom precedes his fear of sin, his wisdom will not endure. Meaning the sages are looking at 2 qualities that are both very significant, wonderful, necessary qualities. You need wisdom. You need to study God's Torah. You need to know God's knowledge. And you need fear of sin, fear of God. And they're saying, well, if you have all this wisdom, but you don't have even stronger fear of God, the wisdom itself isn't going to last. But if you have the fear of God, that's really your roots. Then the other very nice thing and important thing to have, wisdom, that will also be maintained. So what we're really supposed to be thinking about here is the dynamics within ourself between our acquisition of Torah and between our fear of God. And I assume for most people here, it's a pretty simple question, but I'll ask it. How have you seen your journey in terms of your relationship to God and fear of God versus your understanding and acquiring knowledge of how to serve God? How would you see the dynamics of those 2 components in your relationship?
Well, if I'm understanding the question right, for us it was like not jumping in with both feet to like try and bring every aspect of Judaism into our home and say like, we're Noachides, and so we want to walk that line very carefully because we want to bring things in for us and the kids that we know are 100% sure that it's kosher for us, meaning it's in line with the Torah for us to do this as Noachides. We're not going to try and grab every little nuance of Judaism because not all of it are we supposed to do, permitted to do, would it be appropriate to do? So we're pretty cautious in like what we bring into our daily lives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolute sense. So what you're saying, my question was, if you would describe your relationship to God, what's more dominant, your emotional connection to him or your acquiring knowledge in terms of him and you and your service?
No, I'd say actually coming from Christianity, the emotional relationship with God has been probably one of the biggest struggles, figuring out how to re-relate to him, because you could say the figure, the personality of God that I grew up with, or that Nathan didn't grow up with much, but like what I grew up with is different from reality. So it's like getting to know someone all over again.
Wow, that's so interesting. You're saying you have to like detox.
Yeah.
So you have to take out whatever images you absorbed, clean the slate, and then form a new relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's hard. Sabra,
like
I saw you
nodding.
That you felt that also?
I do. I received a solicitation for a donation in the mail last week from an organization that I always supported. But I had to rethink my commitment to them based on their religious views and service. And it was a little bit of a conundrum. I thought, do I send them a donation or do I not? And pray for them maybe instead. But, I did kind of struggle with it a little bit. It always brought me closer to God when I was helping them, but I was a different person then. And so that just came to mind
I hear
as
what you're
something I
saying.
struggled with.
I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying. So in a sense, the person who was not really practicing Christian has it easier in that they don't have to take away, they can just build a fresh relationship. But if you have this not really grounded on truth or God's truth relationship, you have to like get all that out of your system and break all that away, break that all down
Hmm.
to have a new growth. It's actually
Hmm.
interesting because we're told that in general, if you're actually really going to a much higher level, you have to begin by breaking away the old so the old doesn't limit the new. Like it speaks of a certain sage, his name was Reb Zera. This was a time when the majority of the Jews, including the Jewish sages, were in Babylonia. But there was a Jewish settlement and Jewish sages in Israel. And the Babylonian sages created the Babylonian Talmud, and the sages in Israel created the Jerusalem Talmud, which is not studied as much, but actually is on a higher spiritual level because the Jews there were on a higher spiritual level and the sages there were on a higher spiritual level. The light was much more obvious. It was the light of the land of Israel. And this sage traveled from Babylonia to Israel, and we are told that he fasted 100 fasts to forget all he knew of the Babylonian Talmud to be able to now take in the Jerusalem Talmud. Like knowing he was going to such a higher level, not that there's anything wrong with the Babylonian Talmud, why do you want to forget it? Well, he just needed to create a space inside of himself where he could ascend to this higher relationship with God through the Jerusalem Talmud. So
That
yeah,
makes sense.
just like
Okay.
we compare it to like a seed, that when you put the seed in the ground, it has to decompose, it has to rot, it has to break
Right.
down, and then new life can come forth. But if you feel bad that you don't want to waste the seed and you don't want it to rot, well, it can never germinate. You can never have new life from it.
Hmm.
But that's an interesting point. Anyone else has experienced that? What Natalie is saying and Sabra sort of going that direction, that because of their previous thoughts and conceptions, it's a little hard to have this strong emotional connection to God because they have to work through and past.
Hmm.
I have to agree with both ladies. And even though I had been away from the church for 25, 30 years or so, it's still, you got to get the rest of those roots out that are still there hanging on. And I don't know why they're hanging on.
Probably because it's
But
something you absorbed in your childhood, and what you absorb in your childhood has very deep roots for our entire life. There's no more important time of education than a young child. And what you absorb as a young child, that is enrooted in you. Absolutely.
growing from I don't remember which rabbi said this, but he was saying that he had a friend that they were in the treasury division of the states and learning how to identify a false like $20 bill to a real $20 bill. They don't I believe he said they don't study the bad $20 bill, but be so rooted in what the new $20 bill is. And then you can tell the false one because you have studied the true $20 bill. And I think that is because right now, to be truthful, it's like, well, I got to study to answer, just in case people ask from Christianity, why am I going this length? And then I should be more into Torah. And then, my prayer life, I'm not doing it that great and that I need to study and and it gets my head woozy and I end up doing nothing. I procrastinate with that. It's just like I don't know what to do first. And that's my dilemma in walking this path, and that I want to do it all. I think that's what it is. I want to do it all, but my mind can only handle a little bit
Bit
at a
by
time.
bit, bit by bit. Well, we always say that God is looking at our movement. It's like we're all moving. We're going up or we're going down. And as long as every day you know you're a bit closer, you're doing a bit more, you're a bit deeper in your commitment and connection, God says, that's great. That's awesome. So God's never going to say like, hey, Linda, why weren't you like Moses? God's not expecting you to be Moses. God's expecting you to be Linda. So every day, a little more, a little more, a little more, a little closer, a little closer, a little closer, and that progression we can maintain. So does anyone see it? So Sabra and Linda and Natalie all had sort of a similar, on some level, relationship to this religion, and therefore can understand this concept or like this sort of difficulty in having an emotional connection with God because you sort of are scarred from your previous false relationships. What I would say is it's really important to have an emotional connection to God. It's really foundational to love and fear God. And those are the wings. We're told love and fear are the wings that allow our service to, so to speak, soar upward to God. And everything we do is supposed to have the wings of love and fear as a reason for doing them. So I'm sure on some level, of course, you do love and fear God, because if you didn't, why would you serve him? Because it's true. Okay, that's a good starting point. But most human beings don't just do things because they're true. We're not just such brainy, cerebral people. It has to get from the brain to the heart before it hits our action, for most of us. So for most of us, we could recognize the truth, but then it still has to get into our heart. And we have to have an emotional response. And then we live in connoissance with that truth. So I'm sure that means on some level you do love and fear God because you are serving him. At the same time, if you know this is difficult for you because of, as you're saying, your childhood, your background, your previous years of beliefs, it doesn't mean you shouldn't have this relationship. It means maybe you have to work a little harder on it. Maybe it's harder for you because of the PTSD, because of whoa, I've been down this road and gotten really burnt. I don't want to walk this road. This is a scary road. This is an uncomfortable road. It's like, no, that was false and this is true. That was evil and this is godly. It's a good mimicking job, but it's evil. Mm-hmm. It's just a false mirror, like a funhouse mirror made to mess you up and bang your head in the glass mirror. There's nothing godly in that mirror. And because of that, everything else happens.
So in my case, that challenge is a way of ascending. The struggle I went through with that solicitation for a donation, I really had to think it through. And when I chose not to send in a donation, that's maybe a challenge from God or a way to get closer to him and ascend a little bit.
Absolutely. And that was a point I was bringing up before about the descent and the ascent. It makes perfect sense to me. That challenge and then saying, no, I can't support this cause. This cause is rooted in evil. Mm-hmm. Even though I could say, oh, but it's helping people. All that's true. But this cause is rooted in evil. I can't do that. Mm-hmm. God doesn't want me to do that. God doesn't want me to support this cause. I feel so bad. I've supported them for years. Well, now I finally have the eyes to see and the heart to understand that this is not good and godly and sweet and holy. No, this is evil. Mm-hmm. I can't support them on any level, even by giving them a tiny donation. Can't do it. So for sure, that process, which is a deep struggle, especially for a person as nice as you, it's okay. I'll just give a few dollars. What do I care? No, we can't support evil. We can't finance evil. We're not allowed to. So that process, of course, brought you higher and closer to God because you had to clarify and be honest with yourself and say, I can't just unthinkingly do this. I have to stop and I have to think. And when I'm stopping and thinking, I know it's wrong, as you did. And that, of course, that's a hard road. And that's what I was saying before, that we believe that any descent is ultimately only to bring us closer. Now, in your case, it was pretty obvious descent, ascent situation. And sometimes it's longer, more protracted, more painful, and not so obvious. Sure. But that's the story behind everyone. But I'm just putting out there what this Mishnah is saying, the point of the Mishnah is that our emotional relationship, our fear of God, and I would say also our love of God, has to be stronger than our wisdom and our intellectual understanding. because that's how we work as humans. That's the roots of our relationship. And those are the wings of our relationship. And when we have that love and fear, whatever we're doing can ascend and soar. And if we're doing it without love and fear, it's not as good, not as powerful, not to bring down God and not to bring up the act to God. So it's a real critical component. We view it like the catalyst, the motor of our relationship is the love and the fear. The more I love and fear, the more I will serve, the more I will, if I love someone, I want to be with them. I want to give to them. And if I fear losing that relationship, I don't want to do anything that would harm it because I don't want to lose that relationship. So love and fear are the catalyst of my relationship with God. And that's why we spend so much time thinking and learning to create the love and fear that will allow everything else to happen. But I totally appreciate what Natalie said and Linda said and Sabra said. I totally get that point. I just think it means you have to work hard. You have to work hard to overcome the toxicity, to overcome the pain and the hurt and the almost, this feels like a very vulnerable space. And just say, yeah, because that was evil. This is godly. This evil is imitating the godly because the godly is so good and godly and powerful. And
it seems like it should be so black and white, but it isn't. And yeah.
It's not. Since it says before the primordial sin, it was black and white. The world was white and the snake was black. And after that sin, it became gray. There's a lot of grays. And the grays are a place of challenge. If it's white, it's obvious. If it's black, I would hope for the high majority of us, it's obvious. But grays are subtle. Grays make things confusing. And our moral compass is going back to, what does God want here? What does God want? Why am I in this situation? What does God want from me? What am I in this world for? How do I fulfill my purpose? How do I bring God in this world? You have to keep going to that space of the real, like I'm saying, the real moral compass, the real inner space of what is God's truth? What does he want from me? And then just stick with that. And nothing else. Nothing else. Just that, almost brutal, what does God want? That is the critical point. What does he want from me? What would God want me to do here? That's what I need to do, and ignore all the other fluff. What does God want? Just like I was saying before, when we're talking about having more children, I'm saying when the world, of course the world doesn't say, oh, children are bad. The world says, children are expensive. The world says, how can you handle it? You have to work. You don't have the stamina. The world says, well, if you have more, the kids you have will suffer because they'll get too little of you because you're going to be, being cut in so many pieces. So many people are having needs. How could you possibly be there for everyone, so have less so you could be for the ones you have? The world's not saying children are bad. The world isn't saying it's not good to have children, but the world is saying all these things that lead you to that conclusion. It's gray. It's not. If it was black, if the world said, oh, kids are bad, kids are a curse, horrible to have kids, you'd be like, that makes no sense. That's off. So black does not entice us. So we have all the grays, all the more subtle messages. Well, it's true, kids are very expensive. It's true. If I look on pen and paper, we can't afford it. It's true that I barely have energy for the ones I have. How in the world will I have energy for more? And if I don't have energy for more, then the ones I have are going to lose out because I won't be there for them, because I won't be present, because I'm going to have another. It's true. And our brain starts clouding something that should be simple and making it very complicated. If you go back to that simple question, what does God want? Oh, well, of course, God wants more people serving him in this world. Okay. So it's that's what I mean by that inner core question that cuts through all the confusions and grays, and that makes sense, and that makes sense, and that makes sense. Wait, but what does God want? I'd ask you whatever that organization was, but you're like, I've given some in the past. It won't look nice. I'd like to be a nice person. The organization, not, but I think where the money's going to, that is something good. And what does God want? How does God want me to behave? So it might be extra challenging, but that just means it's probably extra important. This is what God wants. Okay, that was number 9. Well, number 10 has a few parts. We'll start with the first part. Maybe this will be easier. It says, anyone whose good deeds exceed his wisdom will endure. But anyone whose wisdom is more than his good deeds, his wisdom will not endure. So before we were talking about fear and love of God, really fear of God and wisdom. Now we're talking about our actions versus our understanding. Like how much we do for God versus how much we learn, study, and understand God. So if you look at yourselves in that different question, how do you see that? Your understanding, what your mind is dictating, as versus the actions you do for God. How do you see that balance in yourself?
I don't really have much of an answer because I'm like, well, I don't know how much I'm doing per se. We're just surviving.
I was actually thinking that this question is harder for a Noahide than for a Jew. So the previous thing we decided was harder for the Noahide because Noahide has this baggage they have to detox from. Here, I think it's harder because, and this is one of the challenges of a Noahide, you can be a total believer in God and a Noahide and not do that much. Or you could be a Noahide and do a lot. But there's a lot of room for, I don't know if I call it personal choice. Meaning, what does God need from you as a Noahide? Well, I could tell you, he wants you to pray to him. Every Noahide is supposed to pray at least once a day to God. He wants you to give charity. Every Noahide is supposed to be giving charity to God. Charity for causes God want you to give charity to. He wants you to honor your parents, something every Noahide is supposed to do as a service of God. He wants you to be honest, uphold courts of justice. So, of course, you don't have courts of justice that are Noahide courts, so that doesn't really apply that much. And he wants you to basically keep the commandments of course, most of the commandments are don't do, don't do, don't do. We have interpersonal ways, how God wants us to treat other people, as we've discussed. But you could sort of get through your day, and he wants you to trust. Trusting is a proactive process. But if you give some prayers, maybe you bless before you eat, and you give some charity, you could sort of be like, oh, I'm a good Noahide. And you could be a good Noahide. You could be a completely good Noahide, and still a lot of your day is not about God. So to be a Noahide that has a lot of God flavoring their day, that their day is different than their neighbors and friends and relatives and acquaintances, colleagues, it's a conscious choice. It's really a conscious choice. You could say, we're barely surviving, and I know I'm supposed to say some prayers and say some blessings and give some charity, and we just can do that a little bit because I'm barely surviving. We're so busy, we're so stretched. And I'm still a Noahide, and you are. As long you could be keeping the 7 laws and not have to do that much. Or you could do more. So how have people found that? Have they found that they have chosen and can bring God more into their life? Or like Natalie is saying, and I hear that 100%, you could be a Noahide, but not that much of their time is given over to service of God. Which of course is impossible for a Jew, because Jews have far more commandments. So like every act is regulated one way or another. So if you're just being an observant Jew, a Jew who wants relationship with God, you're serving God all day long automatically. You don't have the choice factor. If you're observant, everything you do has to do with relationship with God. Well, as we're saying, if you're a observant Noahide, yes or no. It sort of more depends on you. So anyone has any thoughts on that? Have they seen that in their own life? Giving God more, giving God less as a Noahide, either way being a Noahide?
Well, for me, I would say yes, definitely. But I know that my situation's a lot different than other people on the call, coming from other people who've come from other religious backgrounds. And that's not my background. So, I mean, yeah, my life went essentially for nothing really related or any service to God to, I mean, most things, decisions, actions throughout the whole day. Absolutely.
So do you see that, Danielle, as a choice that you're choosing to bring God in so much, and that it could be a Noahide that doesn't bring God in as much, but I want that choice because I see the difference in how it's affecting my life? Or you don't see it that way. You just see, no, if I'm a Noahide, well, God is part of all the details. So it's just there for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely just there for me. Like God is in all the details for sure. Yeah,
It's really beautiful.
absolutely.
That's beautiful because, again, I do feel like you could be a Noahide without that, but it's good to have that commitment so that you really do see God in all the details of your life, which is exactly, of course, where he wants to be. And yeah, I do think Danielle does have an unusual but different situation than many Noachides because she didn't come from a other false religion background, so she doesn't have to clean out that junk. And most Noachides honestly do, because Noachides are generally very religious, spiritual people. So they probably were religious and spiritual and then say, wait, this isn't true. This doesn't line up. This is false. This doesn't make sense. And wait, where's the truth? And then as real truth seekers, they found God. So that's most Noachides probably very oversimplifying are walking that road. But you're right, it does make it easier if that wasn't your journey. Anyone else on this question of, do you feel as a Noahide God is there for you all day one way or another, or do you feel as a Noahide that he's not, and you could have a life that looks very similar to your neighbors except for a few critical differences?
I think how we spend our free time, to the extent that we have a little free time. I think I was playing too much on Facebook today, and I got a very nice, gentle reminder from Robin, who's not here tonight, but she sent me a lovely video about giving charity. And so I immediately shut down the Facebook and went to that. And I realized, yes, I was spending too much time on Facebook today. It was a waste.
Right. Well,
I
we
could
all
be
can
doing
fall into
more.
that trap. And it's good that
Yes,
you recognized it and said, okay, I'm done, God. I got the message.
yes,
I'm moving on. I got better things to do with my time.
yes.
Yes,
Oh, thanks, Natalie.
yes, 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 yes. For one person, it's Facebook. For someone else, it's YouTube. For someone else, it's WhatsApp.
Sure.
Yes. The insidious social media that steals our times, that steals what we're supposed to be putting our time into. Yes. Yes. And we probably all have to figure out the parameters that we don't fall in that trap that is very common and, at the least, if not worse than that, such a complete waste of time. Continuing in the same 10th Mishnah, that it goes on, it has 3 parts to it. So the first part we just discussed, the balance of our wisdom and our good deeds. The next section says, anyone who your fellow man is pleased with you, God is pleased with you. And anyone who your fellow man is not pleased with you, then God is not pleased with you. Do you see this in your world? Now, again, you could say, also, my world's a little different, and I don't know what it means fellow man pleased with me. But I would think it would generally be saying someone who is a kind person, a good person to other people, there for other people. That's a person that other people really hold from. And when other people appreciate you, God also appreciates how you behave in this kind, generous, compassionate way with others. And if you don't, and you're like, no, I totally believe in God, but I have no patience for these people. I'm not saying you're mean per se. That would be a whole other level. It could just be you're not interested and not there and not out there doing and trying to help. So your fellow man is just whatever, because that's how you're behaving towards them. Then God also feels like, what? These are my creations. Every human being is a creation of God. I want you to be there for each other.
I don't think that we really, or at least me, at times realize like a smile to someone. You don't know what's going on with their life, but there's just something within that, you know, for whatever reason, that might spark something within them, whatever is going on in their life. My sister was in the hospital for almost a week, and going out and checking on her, the morning, night, and stuff like that. just feeling like I'm doing the things that God would have me to do to show his love, through me, though we don't talk about religion or anything, but just being there and that.
Absolutely, 100% for sure. And I think you're so right. None of us know what anyone else is carrying. A good assumption is everyone is carrying something. It's a good assumption that we all have things we're carrying, whatever anybody else's life looks like. We're all carrying things. And yes, I love what you said about that smile. You never know the next person who needs that smile. It's could mean a lot to the person and to God that you're extending love. You're creating love between humans, and God really appreciates that. Natalie?
All right, kind of a few thoughts on that one. One, a habit that a roommate of mine in college had always done that I've tried to adapt because everyone always loved it when she did it, is if you're at a restaurant or you're checking out at the grocery store, any place where somebody's like wearing a name tag and they're doing and in like a service something or other, not only do you say thank you, but then you say thank you their name. You can
Yes,
see it,
that's very
and if you're not
powerful.
sure how to say it, like if they're checking out your groceries, you're like, oh, that's a really unique name. How do you pronounce it? Right? Like,
Oh, that's a good line. I never thought of that one.
Yeah.
and anytime like we were at the grocery store or anything, I mean, it just, people's face would just light up when she would do that. I was like, that's a great thing. She says, oh, my grandparents have always done this. I'm like, this is genius. But at
Yes.
the flip, so on the flip side, so like just trying to be, aware of people around you. And like you said, give a smile and a word of encouragement, ask how they're, they always ask you how your day is going, but then we always ask like, how's your day going? But on the flip side, I'm kind of chuckling to myself because with work, like there's plenty of people that I think I serve well. I mean, I'm in sales, so service is a lot of what we do, but it's not perfect. But I also have people who, one in particular that comes to mind that I think just hates me.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
I'm
pretty
like,
extreme word.
4 years I can't get this guy to, to soften up. So I've had one other person say, well, you just got to make it your mission for this guy to like you. I'm like, I have tried. If I made this, I'd go crazy if I did this all the time because I have done everything I can think of and he really doesn't like me. So I'm not perfect there.
But you're saying in general, in your profession, you are focused on people and focused on connecting to people. To most
Yeah,
people.
and for the most part, I'm really good at it.
It's a very beautiful thing because as we're saying, God wants it. God wants people to love each other and to have love and kindness and focus and attention and empathy and care for each other. And this is a pretty cold, lonely world for a lot of people. So it's even more essential. That's what Linda said about that smile, or what you're saying about, I always try to do that. Also, like on the phone, because when they finally pick up your call or whatever, they always say their name. I try to remember their name so that when I end the call, I could say, thank you, Raymond, whatever. This time of coming, the Messiah, adding in goodness and kindness, and you were so kind and helpful. Thank you so much, Raymond. Of course, it makes such a difference because you're saying you're a person. You're not a non-entity. You're not meaningless. You're not a disembodied voice. You're a person, and I'm acknowledging you as a person. And many of those, yes, gas station people or, cashier or, where they become to feel like they're not people. They're not viewed as people. So every time we do, it's just like Linda's smile. Absolutely. That smile, that recognition of the person, that thank you by name. Yes, those are accessible ways we can honor and create such positive feelings. So powerful, so simple. We just literally have to be focused. It's literally just asking us to care, and then we can do it. Doesn't cost a penny. Doesn't even take much time. Just to care. All right, we will stop at this point. Dixie?
What I try to do is like if there's somebody, I usually always smile at people, even if they don't smile back. That's okay. But when there's people in the store or something and they seem a little down, I'll say, is everything okay? And it depends upon their answer, what you can do for them. But it always seems to make them feel better if you ask them if everything's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's even going a step further because you're sort of opening yourself up to what they're going to respond.
Yep.
Mhm.
And some they say no, and I say, I'm sorry, what's wrong? And if they say no, and I'll say, well, if I can help, I will, but if I can't, that's okay too.
That's really beautiful. That's really special. Just because also you're just saying you're human and I see it looks like something's hurting you. And I care because you're another human being. And so many people don't have that sense that anyone cares. So
Well, and very few people do care.
it was a very tragic story of someone who suicided, and he left a note, which the police actually found, because whenever there's a suicide, they have to make sure it's not a homicide. And so they searched his things, and he wrote this note where he literally wrote that he's going to whatever it was, a bridge. And if anyone along the way, I don't remember if he said smiles at him or talks to him or says hello to him. He said something very specific. He's not going to do it. And this is the note that was found. So clearly, whatever he was saying, I don't want to, this is a true story, so I don't want to say something false. I don't remember if anyone smiles at him, if anyone says hello to him, if anyone talks to him, looks at him. I don't remember what it was. One of that type of thing, and obviously no one did. So yeah, we can never underestimate that power. Can never underestimate that power. There's a whole very long story that I know, and I actually know some of the people involved. It's a very, very long story of someone who was literally planning a suicide, and the hand of God, it's like too long to go into the whole story, but the hand of God, he decided before he goes, he wants to have the final positive interaction with his child. He wanted to take her to a movie theater, and he took her he didn't want to see anybody, so he took her to a mall that he knew was completely shut down besides the theater. And lo and behold, it was December, it was Hanukkah. He was a Jewish man, and Chabad had set up some Hanukkah menorah lighting, and obviously nobody was there because it was a deserted mall besides the movie theater. And they pulled him into the dancing. They were dancing, they were lighting the menorah, they were having jelly donuts, latkes, potato pancakes, all the great stuff. And basically he was like the only one there. And so the Chabad people, when they left the place, they thought that was a real disaster. And we were really failures that we didn't check and find out that this mall is closed besides the movie theater. But for this man, he left the movie theater and he decided life is worth living. And as the story goes on that I'm not going to tell, these two parties reconnected and then later shared and saw what was really going on then. But literally, we have, like Linda said, we have no clue. We have no clue. It's always worth it to extend that care, that love, that smile, that compassion, that using of name, that saying, how are you? Yes. We have no clue. All right. We will